Joan Murray. Joan Murray was 47 and worked at a bank. She had already done 35 skydives, so when she jumped from 14,500 feet in September 1999, she had no reason to think this one would be any different. She pulled her main parachute, but it didn't open. After a few tries, she reached for her backup chute, and it opened. But almost right away, she started spinning, which twisted the cords into a knot and collapsed the chute. She hit the ground at 80 miles per hour. A fall like that is almost never survivable. The entire right side of her body was crushed, and doctors had to do 20 surgeries and 17 blood transfusions to keep her alive. The reason she survived was just crazy. It turns out Joan landed right on top of a fire ant mound. The impact kicked up the colony, and hundreds of ants swarmed her. They stung her over 200 times. Fire ant venom has a chemical called solanopsin that fires up the nervous system. So much of it got pumped into her that it kept her heart beating until paramedics got there. If she had landed anywhere else in that field, she would have died. Joan spent 2 weeks in a coma, but she made a full recovery. And 2 years later, she went skydiving again. Matt Suter. Matt Suter was 19 and living with his grandmother in Missouri. On a March evening in 2006, he was watching TV in her mobile home with her and his uncle when the weather turned. A tornado was heading straight for them, and they had no time to get out. It hit the trailer at around 135 miles per hour. The roof came off, the walls broke apart, and Matt was sucked straight out into the storm. He was wearing nothing but his underwear. When he came to, he was lying face down in a grass field with no idea where he was or what had happened. The only injury on his body was a bump on his head from a lamp that hit him inside the trailer. He got up and walked to a friend's house for help, not knowing if his family was alive or dead. His grandmother and uncle had actually crawled out with only minor injuries. They had gone looking for Matt, expecting to find a body, but he was already safe at a friend's house a quarter mile from where the trailer used to be. Rescuers later measured how far Matt had been thrown and got 1,307 feet. Guinness World Records confirmed it as the farthest anyone has ever been flung by a tornado and survived, beating the previous record by over 300 feet. Anatoli Bugorski. Anatoli Bugorski was a researcher at a physics lab in Russia. On July 13, 1978, he was checking a broken part inside the lab's particle accelerator, but the safety systems had failed, and the machine was still on. As he leaned in, a beam of protons moving near the speed of light shot straight through his skull. It went in through the back of his head, passed through his brain, and came out his nose. He saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but didn't feel any pain. The amount of radiation that hit him was about 300 times what it takes to kill a person. No one should survive that. But because the beam was only a few millimeters wide, the damage stayed in a narrow line instead of spreading through his whole body. And by sheer luck, that line missed his brainstem. A few millimeters in any direction, and he would have died on the spot. He lost hearing in his left ear, and the left side of his face became paralyzed. He started having seizures, but his mind stayed sharp, and because that side was paralyzed, it never got wrinkles. To this day, one half of his face looks decades younger than the other. Bugorski went on to finish his PhD. He kept working at the same lab where it happened into his 80s. Ludger Sylbaris. Ludger Sylbaris was a worker living in the city of Saint-Pierre on the Caribbean island of Martinique. On the night of May 7, 1902, he got into a drunken bar fight and was thrown in jail. The next morning, Mount Pelée erupted. A wall of burning hot gas and ash tore down the mountainside at over 400 miles per hour, with temperatures above 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. It hit Saint-Pierre in under 2 minutes, melting glass and setting buildings on fire instantly. Around 30,000 people died in minutes. Sylbaris was still locked in his cell. It was a small stone room, partly underground, with thick walls and only a tiny slit near the top of the door for air. Some of it got in through the slit and burned his skin, but the walls held and took the worst of it. He pressed himself into the far corner and waited. Rescuers reached the jail 4 days later and heard faint tapping from inside the cell. Sylbaris was badly burned but alive. Out of the entire city, he was one of only 3 survivors. He was pardoned for his crimes and later joined Barnum and Bailey's circus, where he toured as the most marvelous man in the world. The only reason he was alive was because he got drunk and picked a fight the night before. Nita Juggi. Nita Juggi was a 12-year-old girl from India who had been dealing with headaches, seizures, and weakness for over 2 years. No one could figure out what was wrong with her. Then her symptoms got so bad that she became paralyzed on her right side and couldn't feed herself. Her parents rushed her to the hospital, where doctors ordered a brain scan. What they found was something no one expected. A tapeworm larva had been living inside a cyst in her head for almost 10 years. It had grown so big it weighed over 1.5 pounds and was nearly the size of her entire brain. The parasite most likely got in through bad food when she was a toddler. It made its way to her brain, and the cyst just kept growing. Doctors were stunned that it hadn't burst, because if it had at any point during those 10 years, she would have died instantly. They took her into surgery, and after 2.5 hours, the cyst was removed in one piece. 2 weeks later, every symptom was gone, including the paralysis, the seizures, and the headaches. Nita went back to living a normal life. For 10 years, something the size of her brain had been growing inside her skull, and she had no idea it was there. Paul Templar. Paul Templar was a 27-year-old safari guide in Zimbabwe. One afternoon in the late 1990s, he was leading tourists down the Zambezi River in canoes when a bull hippo came out of the water and knocked one of his colleagues into the river. Templar paddled over to help, but before he could reach him, the hippo came up under his canoe and swallowed him headfirst. He was inside the animal's mouth up to his waist, squeezed between rows of teeth that can bite with over 2,000 pounds of force. Hippos kill more people in Africa than any other large animal. Templar managed to wriggle free, but the hippo came back and took him under again, this time feet first. He punched and kicked until it let go. Then it grabbed him a third time, shook him, and finally spat him out. By the time he got to shore, he had 40 puncture wounds across his body. His left arm was crushed and had to be removed, and one wound on his chest was so deep his lung was visible through it. It took 8 hours to get him to a hospital, all without painkillers. The only reason he survived was that the hippo kept letting go. If it had bitten down fully even once, he would have been cut in half. Betty Lou Oliver. Betty Lou Oliver was 20 years old and working as an elevator operator on the 80th floor of the Empire State Building. On the morning of July 28, 1945, a thick fog had rolled over New York City, and a B-25 bomber pilot flying through it was too low. His plane slammed into the building between the 78th and 88th floors, killing the pilot, his crew, and 11 people inside. Betty was thrown by the blast and hit a wall. She had burns across her body, a broken pelvis, a broken back, and a broken neck. First responders arrived and loaded her onto a stretcher. To get her down to the ground floor, they put her in another elevator. But the crash had weakened the cables, and as the car passed the 75th floor, they snapped. Betty dropped 75 stories down the shaft. She survived that too. The broken cables had fallen to the bottom of the shaft before she did, and piled up like a coil, which cushioned the landing. On top of that, the sealed shaft trapped air under the falling car and slowed it down just enough. Betty spent several months in the hospital, but made a full recovery. She had survived a plane crashing into her building and a 75-story elevator fall, back-to-back in the same morning. Danie Pienaar. Danie Pienaar was a research student studying rhinos in South Africa. One afternoon in January 1998, he went out tracking alone without telling anyone where he was going. While wading through a stream, he felt a burning pain below his knee. When he looked down, he saw 4 small holes and a drop of blood. He had been bitten by a black mamba. Black mamba venom attacks the nervous system and shuts the body down fast. Without antivenom, the bite is 100% fatal. Most people die within hours, some in under 30 minutes. Pienaar was alone in the bush, hours from any hospital. He tied a belt around his leg and ran to his car. He started driving over 100 miles per hour, but the venom was already taking over. His vision was narrowing and his hands were going numb. So when he spotted another car on the road, he forced it to stop, and they rushed him the rest of the way. By the time they reached the hospital, over 2 hours after the bite, he could no longer talk or swallow. Doctors gave him antivenom just in time. If the bite had landed on his chest or neck instead of his leg, the venom would have reached his brain in minutes, and he never would have made it to the car. Pienaar made a full recovery. Anna Bågenholm. Anna Bågenholm was a 29-year-old doctor from Sweden. On May 20th, 1999, she was skiing with friends near Narvik, Norway, when she lost control and fell headfirst into a frozen stream. She broke through the ice but got stuck, leaving her trapped upside down in the freezing water. 2 friends tried to pull her out, but the ice was too thick, so they called for help. Anna found a small air pocket under the surface and kept breathing for about 40 minutes before her body shut down. Without that air pocket, she would have drowned in minutes. By the time rescuers cut through the ice, she had been under for 80 minutes. Her body temperature had dropped to 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest ever recorded in anyone who survived. She had no pulse, no breathing, and no brain activity. As far as anyone could tell, she was dead. At the hospital, over 100 doctors and nurses worked in shifts for 9 hours to warm her blood using a machine. Then her heart started beating again. The freezing water that should have killed her had actually cooled her brain so fast that it barely needed oxygen, which is why she came back with no brain damage at all. Anna made a full recovery and went back to work as a doctor at the same hospital that saved her. Ewa Wisnierska. Ewa Wisnierska was a German paraglider training for the World Championships in Australia. On February 14, 2007, the sky looked clear, so she took off. But shortly after, a massive storm formed right above her. The updraft caught her and started pulling her straight up. She had no way to fight it. Within minutes, she was rising at over 40 miles per hour, and the higher she went, the colder and darker it got. Lightning was going off all around her, and hail the size of tennis balls was hitting her from every direction. Then she blacked out. While she was unconscious, the storm carried her to 32,634 feet. That's higher than Mount Everest and near the cruising height of a passenger jet. At that height, there's almost no oxygen, and the temperature drops to around minus 40 degrees. Her body was covered in ice. Without gear, a person can only last a few minutes up there. She was up there for close to an hour. About 40 minutes later, she woke up. She was still on her paraglider, frozen, bruised, and barely able to move her hands. But she managed to steer herself down and landed on a farm, 37 miles from where she started. One of Australia's top paragliders said her survival was like winning the lottery 10 times in a row. Truman Duncan. Truman Duncan was a 40-year-old railroad worker in Cleburne, Texas. In June 2006, he was riding on the front of a slow-moving train car heading to a repair dock, something he had done hundreds of times. This time, he slipped and fell between the cars. He tried to run, but the wheels caught his lower body and dragged him about 75 feet down the tracks before the car stopped. The train had cut him nearly in half through the pelvis. One leg was completely gone, and the other was hanging on by a single strip of muscle. Duncan was still conscious, and he pulled out his cell phone and called 911 himself. Then he called his family. It took paramedics 45 minutes to find him in the massive rail yard, and he stayed awake the entire time. The reason he didn't bleed out was that his body went into a kind of emergency shutdown. Blood flow slowed to protect what was left. His heart, lungs, liver, and one kidney were all still working because the cut happened just low enough to miss them. A few inches higher and it would have gone through his organs. Duncan went through 23 surgeries over 4 months. He now uses a wheelchair, but he made a full recovery and went back to work at the very same rail yard where it happened. Tsutomu Yamaguchi. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a 29-year-old engineer working for Mitsubishi. On August 6, 1945, he was in Hiroshima on a business trip when the United States dropped the first atomic bomb. It went off about 2 miles from where he stood. The blast knocked him off his feet, blew out his eardrums, burned the left side of his body, and blinded him. When he could see again, the city around him was gone. He spent the night in the ruins and got on a train home to Nagasaki, thinking he was heading somewhere safe. On August 9th, he showed up to work covered in bandages and started telling his boss what had happened. His boss didn't believe him. He thought Yamaguchi was exaggerating, that one bomb couldn't wipe out a whole city. While Yamaguchi was in the middle of explaining, the second atomic bomb went off, again about 2 miles away. His co-workers dove for cover the way Yamaguchi had just described, and that may have saved their lives. Between the two bombs, over 200,000 people were killed, but Yamaguchi survived. He is the only person the Japanese government has officially said survived both blasts. If he had been a little closer to either one, he wouldn't have made it. He lived to 93 and spent his last years speaking out against nuclear weapons. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.